we all have to agree you can't have your diet be high fat and high carbohydrate. That is not going to work. That's called standard American. Look, go to the mall, like go to the airport. Look at how we're doing on standard American. We're not doing too great. So we got to go one or the other. And you actually helped fix your skin by going very low fat, very high carbohydrate. But there's a difference in the way those two diets work. And hearing you explain this, I thought was fantastic. How one speeds up and one kind of slows down. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of nuance within that. And before I jump into answering your question, we have been a group of us been doing some research into this, some pretty heavy research experiments with ourselves and clients. And what we're finding is I think there's two separate things to consider at all times. One is quality of the food, right? Fruit's different than table sugar. I think we all have a pretty good grasp on that, but we also have to look at different macro ranges and what they mean. And when you are talking about low quality foods, your macro ranges will drastically change a human's thing. But what we're finding now with quality foods is that there's a lot more wiggle room. So people like me and Paul Saladino and a few others have gone to a place where we're like, okay, a place that we haven't personally jumped into as healthy people is high sugar, high fat in the same diet. Now, Paul is banging out days of up to 380, 400 grams of fruit carbs per day while eating nothing but animal fats and animal proteins on top of it. So by the nutrition, if he enters this stuff into Chronometer or MyFitnessPal, it's going to be a high carb, high fat diet. And he is thriving like crazy. Now, there's some other factors. He moves his body a ton. He gets out in the sun a lot. He uses the glucose that he eats. He earns his carbs. And his carb sources are absolutely perfectly clean. But in general, what we found is that even from basic clean sources, most people in general do either need to be on the higher end of fats with the carbs very low, or the opposite, the fats quite low and the carbs more elevated. One thing that the vegan community was missing and that I was missing was the thing in the middle that really makes everything work is the protein's got to be super high. If the protein's high, you have the most wiggle room because it's not going to leave enough grams of carbs or grams of fat to negatively affect you. And also the effect that protein has on the blood sugar is amazing. It's such a stable force. And it's such a healing nutrient that has been so demonized. It's like the most demonized nutrient there is. And of course, you do have to blame the vegans for this because they have a full assault about too high of protein and all these literally fake studies and all these bot studies that mean nothing. But what I found for me is I had success on an extremely high carb system and basically no fat because it did to me what chemo does to people with cancer. It killed everything, including my libido, including my testosterone. It killed my skin disease, but it left me in a place of being like someone who just had a successful chemo treatment. I didn't have any symptoms, but was I thriving the way that I am now? Absolutely not. And I think that the misconception is that maybe people should start there. And it's like, no, like you can have that same healing effect while thriving hormonally. And I found that cleansing and detoxification in the way that I was doing it back then with a high carb, low fat diet was like adding fuel to the fire. It was just scorching me out. So I would consider that like sped everything up, sped healing up, but also maybe overly aggressive. Whereas even if you look at things like heart rate and blood pressure, when you have elevated fats and very low carbohydrates, a lot of alchemy happens in the body that feels slower. You feel more relaxed. You feel like things aren't happening at a breakneck speed. Your mind is actually tuned in. You can articulate your words. You're not so much in a rush anymore. Some of the hyperactivity or twitchiness or just kind of ADD symptoms that a lot of people on high carb diets experience completely goes away. And as far as the detox and cleansing side of it goes, the body thrives on connecting fat to toxins and then pooping them out or peeing them out or sweating them out. Whereas sugar, if you're eating even fruit and some potatoes or sweet potatoes like I was back then, your body's constantly having to kind of clean that out, and then clean itself out. So it is a very distinct thing, but I also say stay tuned because we're doing some pretty wild stuff, and I think there's going to be some more information out there. Personally, right now, I do unlimited fruit and unlimited animal products at times, and I have the dysbiosis and the gut stuff when I'm doing that is non-existent. The caveat though is there is a customization process for everyone, and it's kind of
Yeah.
finding that those macros that I was talking about that work perfectly for you and knowing what your range is, because there's going to be people who don't thrive on a high fat diet or a very high fat diet. They just need enough fats. They need enough fats to give them the nutrients that they need to be healthy and hormonal and all that. And they do a little bit better on elevated carbs. And there's the opposite. There's people out there that the carbs are just going to always mess with them no matter how clean the source. So finding out what you are is of the utmost importance as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's the fun part about nutrition, isn't it? When we think we know everything there is to know about nutrition, and we learn all the time that there's other ways of doing things. We refine as we go. And so I absolutely love that process. Certainly, a very strong animal-based or carnivore diet has worked really, really well for me and a lot of my clients, which is great. I do want to ask if somebody chooses to do more of a carnivore style, and especially initially when they're getting rid of some of the carbohydrates, and maybe that's the less appropriate time to include things like a lot of sugar, a lot of fruit, a lot of honey, but knowing you can add that in later on if you like. Where do you put the focus with people? Is it, do you get better skin health results by focusing on fat or focusing on protein?
Probably protein, to be honest with you. The fats, like I said, are extremely important, but with most people, you just have to get the amount of fats that will produce the alchemy that is needed to be healthy, you know, for your brain and for your hormones and for everything else. Also, if you're not getting saturated fats and cholesterol, then you're probably not going to ever get vitamin D from the sun. So you have to get enough fat no matter what. But what I see is the people who don't eat enough protein across the board struggle. With my clients that just undereat their protein or have an aversion to it, they're the hardest ones to figure out that puzzle piece. With the protein high and the fat high, what I've seen comparatively to high carb is that the healing of the biomarkers, meaning your sleep, your testosterone, your sex drive, your ability to articulate words, your overall sense of well-being and your mood, your creativity, your athletic ability skyrocket extremely fast, like faster, like surprisingly fast. Even when I went through it, it was just like, man, I was an athlete my entire life and I'm getting gains like I'm kind of on steroids. Um, and the other hand, a high carb that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, totally. Well, we're so glad that you prioritize protein. That's something we've definitely learned along the way as well. How do you think about collagen protein as either something that needs to be in the diet or something that needs to be supplemented?
You know, I think for me, I try to be open-minded to everything. And I definitely don't come from the school of, I know what's best. I come from the school as I'm got my white belt on and I'm traveling around to different dojos, getting my ass kicked so I can learn. And what I've found is kind of across the board with my clients, I steer them away from anything powder, anything related to supplementation, not because it doesn't have its place, but because it's like, it's kind of like focusing on trying to throw a curveball before you can pick up a baseball. First, pick up the baseball, then be able to throw the baseball, then be able to throw that fastball. Then down the line, the curveball will come. It's kind of more of also what are the behaviors that will take you to where you need to go. And the behaviors are eat animal based, work out daily, sleep well, and get in the sun. And we're going to start there with everybody. Now, does collagen, the nutrient collagen and collagen peptides have a place in healing the skin? Oh, for sure. Definitely. They're one of the most magic nutrients there is for skin health. That's why there's a whole industry built around supplementation of them for sure. But I think getting them from whole food natural sources definitely is the way to go, especially at first. Now let's talk about someone who has been consistent with their diet. They're getting a full spectrum of different animal foods and animal proteins and animal fats, and they're hitting everything, but something's lacking. That's when I will reach for collagen peptides in powder form or pill form, or possibly things like liver supplements or organ meat supplements to round out nutrient profile and allow people to actually get what they need. And also there's a big behavioral component to all of this. Some people at the end of the day just won't be able to eat the great foods all the time. And for those people, supplementation is probably going to be something that they'll have to use as a crutch, and works way better than the alternative.